Welcome to Beanie Composter. Today I'm going to give you the ultimate review on the Hotbin Composter. Whether you should buy one, what it's like to own one, and if it's worth it. Andy Murray did say when he lost his first Wimbledon final, this isn't going to be easy. Well, this space here is tighter than me. Excuse the filming, there will be a few shadows here and there. So we've had ours for around 3 years, maybe a little bit longer. I'm going to tell you what it's like having one, the ups and the downs, and is it really worth it. So when you first get it, we've got the Mark 1 one, but now they've got a Mark 2 one. But whatever one you've got, they pretty much work the same. So does it work? Look at this. We are rocking and rolling there over the green, which just shows you how hot it does get. So when you buy this, you'll receive your hot composting bin, which is made from a material they use for like car bumpers. When you buy it, you'll notice it looks quite sort of fragile. It looks like you could actually just put your finger through it, but it is actually quite tough, and it's more robust than you actually think. It does say not to get any sharp objects close to it, so that is one thing to consider where you set it up. So I wouldn't be like bringing forks and rakes right past it, because if you sort of stab the fork into it, that would damage it. But generally, if you've got it in a a sort of spot where you don't sort of have a lot of traffic, you're going to be fine. So when you first buy this hot composting bin, what you'll receive is the actual bin. You'll get a kickstart bottle, which is basically just a plastic bottle that you can put boiling water in and get the temperature up if it's gone cold. You'll get a stirring raker, which in my opinion is essential for what you need to do with it. And you'll get a smallish bag of wood chippings, which is like your bulking agent, which is essential to keep the airflow. So the way this thing works is you've got an air vent at the bottom which draws air up almost like a chimney effect, and then you've got a vent at the top there which this open and shuts. So ideally you want it just open at about 2 to 3 mil, and then you're drawing the air through, and then that's keeping the compost aerobic, and then that heats it all up. You've got a door here which is held on with these 2 straps, and that's where you take your compost out. And then you've also got at the bottom like the actual water light tray which comes out of the compost, sits at the bottom, and you can collect that and use that as a feed. So that's how it basically works. You've got 2 temperature dials, one on the top here, which I don't at the moment it's reading quite high, but generally it doesn't always give you an accurate reading, because depending how much you've got in your bin. But you've also got one in here which comes out, and that one you stick in the compost just to sort of that one gives you a more accurate temperature of what your compost is at. And if you see what ours is at, that is rocking and rolling. So that's the basics of what you would get. When you initially come to setting up your Hotbin composter, you want to locate it on like a paving slab, something solid. Don't have it lifted up, because you could end up with like vermin nesting underneath it. So on a solid slab or path. Doesn't have to be in direct sunlight, so it can be in shade, that's no issue. But the initial setup, you need to make sure you're putting enough waste in to fill it up to the top of this hatch thing there. Don't put any raw meats, fish, cooked foods in there at this stage, so it just needs to be like vegetable peelings, cut grass, garden, you know, waste, so nothing raw. And then once, you know, you get that up to temperature, you'll find all this information on the Hotbin Composting Company's website. That's got loads of information. There's a forum you can join. But once that goes up to temperature, then you can start adding, you know, your cooked food and raw meats and things like that in. But initially, don't put any of that in. When you've got that filled, you know, up to there, and you start getting it to the temperatures, which on this thermometer, what you want to get it running in between is between the 40 and the 60. So, you know, on this one you've got the green there, which shows you once the needle's in that, you can start putting cooked foods in there, raw chicken, fish, you know, all sorts of things that you wouldn't be able to put in your normal composting bin. So once you've got it up to that temperature, you can start putting all those sort of things in there. And what I really like is in this part here, you've got like a filter, which I think has got, you know, certain sort of stones and coals and, you know, whatever in there that filters like all the smells, so you don't get any smells with this, and there's no you don't have loads of flies hanging around here, you know, so that is another great feature of this. I did mention once before in a previous video that our initial composting bin had like a rat problem, so this is what led me to get this. I'd done a lot of research, and since we've got this, we've had no issues with any vermin, so rats, mice, you know, we don't have flies hanging around there even in the summertime, so, you know, that is a real good thing about it. The process you need to use when putting stuff into your Hotbin composter is once a week you're going to need a minimum of 2 of these caddies. If you've got the 200 litre, that's the biggest composting bin. If you've got the mini, then just 1 of these a week will be sufficient. But this thing does actually go through stuff like unbelievably. Once you get it up to the right temperature, if it's, you know, at 60 degrees, then they say it's composting 32 times quicker than a normal composter. So you know, the amount of stuff that you go through can be phenomenal once it's all running up to temperature. So I can probably get, you know, 2 of these full up every other day, so you give it a day's sort of rest to sort of break down the stuff and get back up to temperature. So what you need to start off with is, with your food or your garden wastes, you need bulking agent first. So that's what you initially get. You get some bulking agent, which is, you know, in this case some wood chippings. We've got a video online that shows you how you can get bulking agent 5 easy ways. So if you're worried about, you know, buying it and it costing you money, then don't worry, it's going to be easy. So look at that video and that'll give you some hints and tips. You will need shredded paper or cardboard, egg boxes, toilet rolls which have been torn up. The thing with this composting bin is you do need to, you know, cut the stuff up quite small, so you can't just get sheets of cardboard and put it in there. It will stop the airflow, so things do need to be broken up or shredded. And then with your kitchen waste or even your garden waste, it is ideal if you can cut it up quite small, because that helps the process, you know. So, you know, say things like banana skins, I always chop them up sort of quite small. So it does take a little bit of effort and time, but it is worth it. And you'll see in this video why it's worth, you know, investing a bit of time into it. So we've got butternut squash peel in there. I would normally cut them like that. I mean, you wouldn't have to. They do say the more you cut it up, the better. So that all goes in with your bulking agent. we've got eggshells. What I do with those, I just crush them up. And then you add in your shredded paper as well. And then if we go to the composting bin, I'll show you putting it in and what you do to it. Once you've got all your stuff in the bucket, then just open up the hatch. That stays open once it's pulled right back. I always take the probe thermometer thing out and leave that to the side, and then I just literally tip all that on top. So give that a nice stir in just to mix that all up. And then you put your thermometer in if you're, you know, keeping an eye on the temperature. And I always make sure all the edges are nice and clean. So make sure that's all nice and clean, because if you get a bit of wood chipping that's like maybe stuck to the edge, or you know, just in there, then that can squash down and ruin the actual lid bit. So all that's mixed in, put the lid down and you forget about it. So it's actually quite simple once you get used to it. Initially, if you've had just a normal compost bin where you just throw all the stuff in and forget about it and you don't have to do all this mixing and that, then initially it can take a little bit of getting used to, but once you got used to it, it's simples. Another great feature of this hot composting bin is you can collect the leachate. So we've got a video, of course, online, so you could see how you, if you buy in a second-hand Mark 1 one, how you can collect the leachate. But if you've got the Mark 2, then you've got a, you know, a tap thing where you can collect it quite easily. But anyway, we use that for feeding plants, you know, like hanging baskets, pots and containers. So that's another great feature that you wouldn't get from just a normal composting bin. So that's, you know, one to consider. You're not buying any sort of plant feed, you've already got it being made for you. If you're wondering whether you've got enough waste for the composting bin, or whether you need 2 or 1's going to be enough, then our garden's roughly 30 foot by 30 foot, and we've got a lot of stuff in there. We've got grass, quite a lot of shrubs, trees, you know, bits and pieces. We love our gardening and we also love cooking. By the way, we've got a channel called Beanie Chef, so if you like cooking or you just want to see some real nice food being cooked, then check that one out. That's Beanie Chef. The missus will leave a link up for you to have a look at that one. So we cook a lot and we garden, and in all that time since we've had this Hotbin Composter, we've hardly ever gone to the, you know, refuge tip with like garden waste. We can just get rid of it all in the hot bin, and also all our food as well. We never put any food out for the, you know, refuge men to take away. So even cooked food, once it's going up to temperature, we put, you know, chicken carcasses, cooked food, not that we have any waste really, but all our trimmings and that go in there, so nothing's going into landfill, it's all going straight back into our garden here. So what results are you going to get if you own one of these Hotbin composters? Ours has been running in the green, so on a really good temperature most of the time. We've had a few ups and downs with that, but I'll explain that later. But in just 7 to 8 weeks, this is what you're likely to get if you follow the guidelines. So that's just been in that composting bin for 7 to 8 weeks, and I think you'll agree that is pretty good stuff for that sort of time. You wouldn't get that out of a normal composting bin. So plenty of worms are in there, which is, you know, great for if you want it to break down, and it's good for the garden. So the bad points about this: if you can't keep the temperature in the, you know, between 40 and 60, then obviously you can't put cooked meats and cooked food and stuff like that in there, or like dandelions, you know, any perennial sort of weeds. So you need to keep it hot all the time for things like that. Now for us, probably every year I've owned this, come like, you know, November, December, January, I've always found it goes cold at some stage. And even like the last week or so, we had it starting to go cold again. So we've got some videos, you know, explaining all that online, but that is one of the downsides. Is although they say in, you know, I think up to -5, 6 to 10 or whatever it was on the composting site, it's supposed to still run really well, but for me, following all the guidelines and that, I still have it go cold. The downside with this is your compost will sometimes, if it is below that temperature and you're putting, you know, like say tomatoes, you know, some garden waste that's got seeds in there, then they can grow back if you try and put this into, like, you know, seed trays and that. Another thing, you might end up having, you know, if you're putting the garden waste in there, you might end up having some slug eggs in there, which sort of never get destroyed. So I've had an instance where we've used this for, like, you know, potting up a few small plants, and then that plant's been eaten by loads of slugs, and when I've looked in the compost, there's been like slug eggs. So I wouldn't advise using this for, you know, seedlings and things like that, because you will probably have some sort of, you know, slugs or, you know, stuff like that that can cause a problem, you know, in that aspect. So we still have to buy potting compost for seedlings and that's the only downside. But for mulching and, you know, larger plants, this is terrific stuff. Last year, obviously, you know, everyone knows what happened with COVID, and my mum's a keen gardener, and, you know, in the UK, the garden centres all shut, so we were lucky that we got a bit, you know, potting compost just before that happened. But my mum grows quite a lot of veg, and we took over to her, you know, where I'd kept a lot of these bags with the compost in, we took that over to her, and she used that for like courgettes, and just grew them actually in the bags with all this in, and they were probably the best courgettes she's ever grown. When you look on the forums and read some things, you see some people moaning about emptying it is, you know, disgusting, or, you know, sometimes it goes anaerobic and starts smelling. But if you follow all, you know, the guidelines and keep it, you know, how it should be run, then you don't really have those problems. When it comes to emptying, people say it is messy and difficult, and all the stuff collapses, which is, you know, kind of true, but, you know, I don't find it really to be that much of an issue. If you're emptying any compost bin, you're going to have some sort of, you know, mess. So, you know, I think if you bear with that, you get really good results. Also, you know, with this, you do have to put a bit more effort in, as in putting the bulking agent, the paper, and making sure your stuff is cut up small. But to me, that's, you know, the enjoyment of owning one. You get a bit obsessed with it, and it's, you know, becomes a bit of a hobby. so I don't really see that as an issue myself. Some people probably would see that as a little bit of an effort, but I think if you're kind of a lazy person, then you probably wouldn't be doing gardening anyway. You know, it does have ups and downs, and you'll see that on our channel, but generally the amount of stuff you can put in this and get out of it is just incredible. Okay guys, looked through the video yesterday and sort of thought I wanted to add a few more things. You wouldn't believe it's the 30th of April today. We're having a mini heat wave here in Surrey, so you know, amazing times to be out in the garden, but it sort of dawns on you how much stuff you've got to do and you know what you are going to accumulate for actually composting. So I just wanted to add a few things. If you know, we showed you on the video our grass, it's not, you know, masses, but that's going to need cutting in the next week or two. And if you've got a big lawn, you wouldn't be able to add all that grass straight into the hot bin in one go. You'd need to put that sort of in batches, because if you just put all of that grass in one go, it'd block the airflow and then it'd stop working. So I'm going to do a video when we cut the grass on how to manage grass cuttings, but that is something, you know, for you to consider. I mean, if we had a massive garden, then probably I'd have a separate, just a normal composting bin for grass and keep the hot bin for all the other stuff. The hot bin does get quite obsessive, and you know, you'll find yourself going along the road and seeing wood chippings and thinking, I need to pick some of them up like I did yesterday. And I'm even sort of drying, you know, the wood chippings out from the winter that have gone quite soggy. So be prepared for it to become quite obsessive. And so, you know, watch this channel and, you know, you'll find lots of ideas. Another thing to consider when you're choosing this is, you know, we've just cut the borders there today because it's like such a nice day and we've got a bit of time, but you won't be able to put all the soil in the, you know, the composter, so you have to make sure you get all that soil off of, you know, whatever it is, weeds and that, because if you put like clumps of soil in there, it's just gonna go, you know, into, you know, a wet clump, and then that'll stop the airflow and it'll stop working again. So this is something you need to consider, that things like this are quite, you know, hard work or time consuming, but as I keep saying, it's definitely worth it. So today I've got, you know, a whole bucket of that. Probably after I've finished this I'm going to have loads more. And then yesterday we pulled up a load of dandelions around, you know, the side bit. So I've got, you know, probably 3 buckets worth of stuff. So that's another thing you need to consider as well, is you might have a backlog of you know, waste that's waiting to go in the compost bin. So I just pile them up in buckets and keep them in the shed, and then every other day I'm tipping a bucket in, especially this time of year when the composting bin is working so well. You just eat through it so quickly that it just disappears. Okay folks, hope that one helps you out. Believe it or not, it's about 17-18 degrees today, and I'm getting a bit hot with this hat on, so I think it's time for me to have a sit down. And Beanie Chef, where's that nice cake you said you were making me? Enjoy.
Every time I plant a new plant in the garden, I use the compost from Hot Composter to mulch around it to give it a good start.